Hello and welcome to The Green Stream, a podcast brought to you by Sustainable Business Network Detroit, a network of partnerships between Southeast Michigan stakeholders, innovators, and changemakers. Each partner is on a mission to advance and amplify sustainable business practices, and we're here to learn from, share, and help activate a sustainable way forward for Greater Detroit. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review and join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And head over to our website, sbn-detroit.org. Now, let's listen in to our conversation with today's sustainability leaders.
Hello and welcome to The Green Stream. I'm Terry Barclay, the President and CEO of Inforum and Chair of the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit. And I am truly excited about today's topic and today's guests on the podcast. Our topic is really investing in sustainable enterprises. And we have two experts and people who have very different perspectives on that topic joining us today. The first is Romy Kochan, who is CEO of Gingras Global. She has been focused, actually, Romy, I was just talking to Kellie before we went live about how you have been focused on impact investing. I think you were one of the very first. And
You're right.
Yeah. And so it's going to be really exciting to hear from you today. So social enterprise impact investing, you're a published author, you're a frequent speaker, you've hosted rockstar podcasts. So we're just really happy to have you on this one today. So thank you for that. And
Thank you for having me.
yeah. And don't, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves really quickly. But then I also want to welcome Kellie Lindsay, who's Director of Strategic Partnerships for AutoTech Ventures. She focuses on technical startups. Well, we'll let her tell us what she focuses on in the automotive, mobility, and transportation spaces. So I'm really excited to get started. So Romy, let's start with you. Just give us, a couple sentences about your background and how you're here today.
Yeah, sure. Well, in 2012, a few years back, I left the private or public investment markets as a wealth manager and institutional investor. I had spent sort of the first quarter of my career in that world and found it interesting but a bit unfulfilling. I was really attracted to the private markets and the businesses, small companies, startups that were trying to do something good with their product or service or profit. And there really wasn't a market for that back in 2011, 2012. So I started traveling around doing some mission work. It started out as faith-based and ended up to be integrated for me. And eventually wanted to say, look, there's a place for missional impact style businesses, but there really isn't a lot of support. There certainly isn't good investment for them. Everywhere we look around the Detroit or Southeast Michigan market, the constant I hear is there's no deal flow. And I thought, gosh, maybe I can help somehow. I don't know if I can, but that seemed to be the question mark of the day. Started Gingras Global as an idea. Then maybe I could pass on knowledge. I had a lot of small business clients as my clientele in private markets, and so I just started there. And then today, this is now a family of companies with fund management and design studios and fiscal sponsorships. So I'll pause there because I'm excited to talk a lot about those learnings today.
Kellie, how about you?
Yeah, I'm Kellie Lindsay. I sit here in Detroit, a chemical engineer by original training, but I've worked across every engineering domain in the automotive and ground transportation ecosystem. So beyond chemical engineering, manufacturing engineering, mechanical engineering, software engineering, and in the tier ecosystem, never for an OEM, so for a lot of manufacturing companies. And, landed about 4 years ago at AutoTech Ventures, which is based in Silicon Valley. I'm the only Detroiter, and I work with our corporate investors on their tech scouting and external innovation and corporate venture practices. So a lot of focus on sustainability these days as well.
Well, I'm just so thankful that both of you are here with us today because I think this is going to be a great conversation. So let's kick it off with a question to both of you. If asking each of you, could you share a pivotal moment? And Romy, you kind of sort of did some of that, but was there a pivotal moment or experience that shaped your perspective on sustainable business practices?
Yes, there was sort of maybe a set of 3 or 4 that all happened right in a row. Sometimes I don't always recognize the pattern right out of the gate. One of the things that hit me very early on, I'd say before I even started Gingras Global, it was the sense that these companies were coming out that wanted to do well in the world or start to have some sustainable business practices, but that there wasn't really an attachment of real business to it. There was sort of like, it ran the gamut for me from, you know, have to do good with the money that we get as a profit and place it properly in the community. We have to do well with it and become a good citizen, to all the way into these small social enterprises that were popping up as part of their rationale for starting the business. But across the board, there wasn't a business case for it. It was more of a philanthropic story wrapped around it, or a charitable responsibility versus a solid business practice. And it became clear to me very quickly on that unless this became interwoven into the business and cost accounted for, profit accounted for, that it was headed for trouble, because they became competing tensions in the business. So that I had some experiences both with some large organizations for the community reinvestment money and the banking financial side that I came out of, and the small businesses. And I saw some bad crashes happen, and unfortunately was affected by those on both sides, and thought, okay, that hurt, and I need to make sure I'm a voice speaking into this, that there needs to be a strong business approach to all of this, instead of like, hey, this is the next, fad or bandwagon that we're all on.
Yeah, great perspective. And I think I remember some of those with you. It was, yeah, no, it's wonderful that you're willing to talk about that and share that as really the spark plug behind everything that you've done since. So Kellie, how about you? Same question for you.
So a pivotal moment, AutoTech Ventures, our investment thesis when we began 10 years ago, sort of started around CAST, which we hear in automotive, which is connected, autonomous, shared mobility, electrification, and digitization. And we have over 100 categories of deal flow coming in across that. And so intrinsically in what we're doing, it's kind of tied to sustainability already. We looked at, getting certified as a sustainable fund. We felt the hurdles were too hard. It constrained us a bit in our own business model. And so we just felt like, all right, we're just going to stay the course. We are focused in a way on sustainability. And in the deal flow, I think the pivotal moment was a couple years ago. We started to notice emerging technologies around sustainability coming through our deal flow. So we created a category just called sustainability, started talking to our corporate LPs about it, like, hey, is this of interest to you? Do you want to include this in the scope of our discussions? And we kind of got met with, not really. And 6 months later, all of a sudden, several corporate venture teams were saying, yeah, you know what, we want to add that to our deal flow of things we're looking at. We're starting to work more closely with our sustainability colleagues. And one company even went as far as to change the S in CASE from shared mobility to sustainability. And I'd say that, things have been emerging, and it's a journey on at least what we're seeing, and that one category of sustainability is now 11 specific categories of capabilities. So I'd say, we've seen things change quite a bit in the span of just even a year.
It's fascinating, and I see Romy nodding her head. So, what sustainable measures do you think companies should prioritize, given that shifting landscape, what sustainable measures should they prioritize before or in order to earn your investment and support? What are you looking for? For both
Should
of
I
you.
go there?
Yeah.
Go ahead. You can go on the cadence of Romy first.
Okay. We'll keep the cadence going. We have very specific things that we've now begun to prioritize, and that is kind of going back old school, that we now say, after all the iterations and all the things we've tried, that the first thing that we want to see an impact business, and assuming, let's assume for this discussion that we're looking at deals that are pre-seed, pre-revenue, seed stage, maybe early stage business where they're looking for investment versus a mature company expansion, because that's 90% of what our activity, what we're looking at. So assuming that we're looking in that space, they typically come to us with a story of all the good they're going to do in the world, and we are now saying, look, we are prioritizing you staying open. The first rule of sustainability is to keep your doors open. Number one, before anything else. If you can't keep your doors open, then we don't have a discussion here. Back to that premise I mentioned in the beginning, this has to be a real business at the end of the day. So what we prioritize, and we've doubled down on this and tripled down, I'd say, in this last year, is customer acquisition strategies. What is your customer acquisition strategy? We're borrowing a page from Gary Dahl's Pet Rock story out of 1975. That was truly an advertising experiment. But in 1975, pre-internet, this team that he assembled figured out how to sell 1.5 million pet rocks for $3.95, making them for 35 cents a piece. Today's equivalent of that would be, by the way, $30 million coming out of the gate in 6 months. But this was a team who knew how to get customers. So we're presented today with a lot of beautiful stories around products or features, service products, features, all the good that they can do for the world, cleaning up supply chains and all that. And just like tech, there can be a beautiful story, and there's a lot of folks looking for unicorns. We are looking for the Gary Dahl teams of the world, the Pet Rock teams of the world, who can get that product, service to market, no matter the brilliance of their impact or their sustainability mission, unless they have customers and they can demonstrate they've got customers to buy those products. We don't. We've spent a lot of time putting together some rationale. I can even send you some studies. We now even take an 80-20 approach. So we prioritize 80% of our due diligence in this customer acquisition strategy, and have gone so far to reduce our own pain in that due diligence by actually building an app for it. So by prioritizing this 80-20, it allows us to really not have to focus on the heavy competition that group might have, or there's less pressure to be a unicorn. It allows us to be industry agnostic and look at lots of deals and really analyze the cost of their mission and how many customers come because of their sustainability versus their product. So we have now prioritized that, and we have found a direct correlation to the value of the companies as we prioritize that. So after we invest in them, if we're making 80% of our decision making on the team that can help gather customers and turn that to revenue, keep the revenue, and grow ongoing recurring revenue, it allows us also as investors to elevate and position that company further and further to help grow their value. So we're 100% prioritizing customer acquisition now in this space.
Fascinating. And you're right, that is so old school. There's a reason why it's old school, right?
Right.
Yeah. Gosh, Kellie, what are your thoughts about this?
I agree on the sustainability of a business is definitely the first thing, especially that venture is looking at, and when we're evaluating teams. So I'll start with, evaluating teams and what we like in terms of sustainability, and maybe then go to a little bit of what corporates are looking for in the sustainability space. But I would say that customer attraction is important. I'd say the other thing that we really focus on as well is defensibility. So when we're looking for solutions, we're looking for something that's unique. We're AutoTech Ventures, so it's tech related. We're looking at IP to build a moat from competition. And then, of course, the customer acquisition and that growth to how big can it be is definitely a part of the equation that we look at. So I would agree with what Romy's saying there. As it relates to sustainability and what I'd say our corporate investors are looking for, at our annual fund forum a couple years ago, we talked about circularity and sustainability and what people were thinking, right? And, from the manufacturing perspective, they were saying, okay, scope 1 and scope 2, what we have control of on our emissions is pretty low hanging fruit, and we can kind of figure that out. What's harder is scope 3, and it's other people that we're working with in our supply chain and how that's related. That's going to be a change in how we do things, how we measure things. And right now there's not a whole lot of transparency as you get down the supply chain tier ecosystem into, carbon footprints and what people are doing. And, regardless of, what regulations there are, say in one region, the US, let's say, where it's kind of uncertain where things will go. There's other regions that still have a focus, and these companies are global, so they still have to do it. So, emerging tools around being able to, track and trace and coordinate, carbon footprints and emissions tracking is something that's, on a journey. There's no clear answer, but people are trying to solve that problem.
Yeah. Can each of you share a success story in the sustainability space without divulging anything that you shouldn't?
Sure, there are so many success stories. I guess I'll give you one that's in alignment with what some of the learnings that I currently just shared around customer acquisition. I think it's well known that an organization that we came alongside to help early on about 10 years ago is Gingras Detroit. They make shoes and other belts and leather items with discarded materials from the auto industry, the high-end leathers, seat belts, and they hire and employ veterans and help them learn how to sew and become a part of the company. Early on, it was such a great story, and there were so many fans with Gingras, but they just had a hard time getting their business model sorted. And so we again said, look, you've got to really strengthen this business model so that you can do all of these things. There was a pressure and on the heart of those that supported him and the founder, Jared, to really do everything for everyone. He was actually part of the inspiration for the Bonfires of Social Enterprise. The Bonfires of Social Enterprise sort of doubles down on this notion as a podcast of you have to have a really good bonfire going before you can keep others warm at the fire or whatever your sustainable impact is going to be. And we consider this bonfire the business analogy. It doesn't work in all cases, but it was the only thing we were using that was sort of communicating the concept back then. So as Jared continued to do that and disciplined himself and allowed us to try disciplinary things within his organization, he just met, and last Friday, this is February 5th, just last Friday, he had a 10-year celebration, and his revenue now has more than 900% increased profitability, 800 some. We've been tracking all the stats, all the sustainability things he's done in his supply chain. And it's directly started to increase as he developed his business discipline around how to do this and developed focus. And he's now a honed leader in this space. But he allowed us to attempt to build the business acumen so that he could do more sustainable things and address each sustainable element, whether it's a supply chain element, a hiring practice, a vendor choice, whatever it may be, in the context of a business practice versus the pressure of the moment, which is important. So how could you put in a long-standing practice that you can rinse and repeat and have your staff grow into versus, so I would point to Jared as that might feel like a small example, but this is one that now has employees that were there that he took off the street and are now co-owners in this important organization. And this business will go on now. We are committed to them for the next 10 years to take them to the next level. We're excited to be part of that journey.
That's incredible. I had no idea. I remember the early days of that company. Thank you for sharing that story and those metrics. I mean, wow.
It's pretty extraordinary that we were allowed to even be part of that journey. Got them their first investment and then, went on from there. So we're very fortunate to have walked alongside and learned with Jared.
What a great story. I feel bad. I don't know, Kelly, how are you going to do?
Well, I'll just say that last weekend I was at Rust Belt Market in Ferndale admiring some Pingree products. So it is cool to see that circularity happening. And it's funny, I was going to pick the same topic. We focus on early stage startups. So we're still early on the story of, what success looks like. But what has been interesting to me is actually circularity in automotive. And what people are thinking about. And it used to be, I used to work for a component supplier where, when parts were salvaged and then we called them pirates down in the South would remanufacture them and sell them into aftermarket. It was, disposed used parts, right? And they weren't certified. And that's sort of been the behavior of the industry. And it's been interesting over the past couple of years that, Europe has some rules about the vehicles and their components being designed in for circularity and recycling. And so you start to see a change in thinking of, not only how they're designing and making them then, and the materials you're using and how they're going into the vehicle and how you can get them out, but even thinking about those parts that used to be, pirate junk, right? Those are now called green parts, right? And so you see companies that weren't really paying attention to what happened to their product at the end of life, starting to think about, okay, how can I create this into a more circular, reusable product? So I like that circularity theme. And I think that's one where we're seeing, more traction happening.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So you've been both of you have been kind of talking about this as you shared examples, but are there, what challenges have you faced in implementing sustainable initiatives and how do you overcome them? Are there themes other than the ones you already mentioned, because you've both been at this a while?
Yeah, Kelly, would you like to go?
Because I'm in the automotive ecosystem and working with very large global companies, I think, and especially around technology that can help, manufacturing efficiencies and, business process efficiencies and logistics efficiencies. There's a lot of companies coming out with, platforms to do that. And, back to your, can you get customer traction? I think, cybersecurity and just integrating into large companies' digital systems is very difficult. And it's hard in certain areas to scale and plug things in maybe as easily as the founders thought they could. And so I think that's a challenge. And I think, there are solutions that are emerging that maybe can be kind of like a middleware, versus really a plugin, and can automate without getting to the, proprietary data. But there's just a lot of risk and a lot of protection that these companies want to have. So there's just hesitancy in moving very quickly on some of these things because of that risk.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
No, I would 100% agree with that. And then pair that with, so I see that same hesitancy from the investment side. Also, I would say a current thing is the overvaluation of some of the companies. They're high priced still, that there needs to be adjustments. And then I would say there's some things that we've really sort of mega themes that we've struggled with as sort of an impact investing support services. If we have two client profiles, one would be the company themselves and one would be the investor. Sometimes we're helping, design or run a fund. Sometimes we're helping the company. But very often we're sitting in this intermediary space with a lot of information that we have an opportunity to have a purview on. And a running theme, if I was thinking a lot about that question ahead of time, and a mega theme that emerged for me over the last 10 years, and we're watching some of the fallout of that today, is this emergence of excitement. At first, just even the impact tracking, if we isolate part of the industry is sort of tracking whatever your impact is and whatever impact lane you're in or type of business. There's lots of arguments and has been and will be on what should and should not be collected when it comes to that. But at first, the information was coming from the enterprise or the frontline party that was generating the impact. Using my earlier example, if it's Jared on the front line and he is repurposing leather, he's got a real pulse on the truth of what's happening with that. And he's got some of his own stats we can roll up. We kind of call that natural data. It's stuff coming out of the enterprise by their natural course of business. And over time, as funders kind of entered the industry and different investment funds had their own thesis that data they needed to collect, they said, hey, we'll invest in you. We need you to fill out this form and this form. Well, we noticed between 2012 and 2015, the impact founders that we were working with were filling out, on average, 30 different forms per quarter per investor, which is a problem, right? Because now not only are they running their business, they're filling out this, and then, oh boy, if they're trying to apply for a grant, they need this metrics. This is becoming something that's going to crash the cart, right? So then in the middle of all of this emergence, eventually by 2019, the public markets are well into it, and you've got the ESG coming out of the top 4 accounting firms. World Economic Forum is now defining what that means. Now they're fully bought on because that, and now they begin to be a bit of a controlling power because of the money in it. So 2 years ago, we said, okay, we got the frontline founders who are producing their own natural data. We got various investment funders, grantors that all want their own data extraction. We've got some sort of systems that are being set up for supply chain and carbon and that. And then we've got sort of these big bodies, these governmental bodies, the World Economic Forum with ESGs. We've got the United Nations and the SDGs. And are these guys, is this a good thing? We think so. Or is this going to become a corporate control thing? I mean, so all this is going on. And as we thought about this in review, every 6 months along the last 10 years, we had to start to take a stand and put some discipline back in and say, no matter who's asking for it, you guys have to find a way as an entity. If you're the one sending out all the data, whether you're a big corporation or a small startup, you have to find a way to work something out with your funders or your grantors and say, this is what I can collect and not. And don't go outside of that or you're going to crash your cart. But we noticed a pattern of every 6 months as we've kept up with the industry around any view or lens of sustainability, this very difficult thing of how do you balance what the world wants with what's practical with my business, I think is today's question. If you're in the sustainability thing, that it's left out of the management and the executive team planning, but we find ourselves constantly saying, did you think about this? Is this involved in your strategic planning? You have to guard your information, just like Kellie said, and you have to figure out a way to deliver it in a way that's not going to take you out. Sometimes you're going to have to say no, even if this is going to hurt your business proposition in the marketplace. So that was sort of a lot, but it's been the same thing, horse of a different color, for the last 10 years.
Yeah. And I can just add, it's the same with funding in the nonprofit world. Everybody's chasing outcome metrics. And when you're not manufacturing something, defining those metrics and tracking them can be almost as costly as doing the work.
Yeah.
And so it's that same balancing act. I wanted to ask the two of you before we move on to the next question. Looking forward, projecting the future, obviously, Kellie, your work clearly is global. And Romy, you're more focused on the US, I think, unless something has changed. It could have changed. But what do you see? Do you see any shifts, or what are you anticipating? Are there big things that you think are coming or that might grow? Maybe not. Maybe it's just going to be more of the same. I'm just kind of curious what your crystal ball says about the challenges going forward.
Specific to sustainability.
Yeah.
I think the narrative is going to have to change for everyone with this, with some of our new administration. And making sure, again, if there was ever a case to make sure your business model was tightened up, it's now. That you've got to have a good, tight business model and know where you fit and where you don't. I think given some of the administration's decisions, whether you like it or not, there is sort of a forced accountability coming down the way. And this is even more of a reason why you need to make a case for yourself on either side of the equation of why you're doing what you're doing, a business case for it. And know the costs of it and know how you're covering that with the business, and so that you can stay sustainable. I think there's also going to need to be a strengthening for those that are committed to something to build out narratives of why you're committed. I think I see emerging, you're going to need a strengthening. Those who can eloquently discuss why their purpose is for existence, why their business model is, why they're addressing sustainability in that way, and conviction. They're going to need conviction to make a stand. And I believe, at least what I'm watching right now starting to emerge, is those with conviction and that are doubling down on their why, they're going to need it to kind of stay the course. But those that have a good why will be able to adapt to whatever situation comes, because life is full of storms. Life is full of storms. And the beauty of business, sustainable business, is it should be the most agile type of business there is. And so if there's one place that has an opportunity to succeed and succeed well, it's sustainable business. But it means being tough, disciplined, and know your why.
Now there's a great quote. Be tough, disciplined, and know your why. A good mantra, a good thing to post on your bathroom mirror, right? That's great. So Kellie, can we talk a little bit about sustainability and mobility companies? What is it that you really look for?
Well, if we were to go along the parallel of CAST, so connected technologies can be the Internet of Things and understanding things, let's say, in the supply chain. So that is a way to use technology to get efficiencies. And there's a company that we have in one of our portfolios, or one of our funds, called Neutral. And trucks oftentimes go drop a load and they're coming back and they're not full, right? And so, I think there was a statistic that, like, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, it was like 80% of loads were less than full, right? And that's just a huge waste. And so Neutral is helping create that neutrality of helping independent truck drivers find, loads so that they can fill their loads and be more efficient in what they're doing. So there's technologies around the Internet of Things, I think, like for fleets, the connected vehicle technologies to run more efficiently, to have more efficient routes that they're running, and being able to find vehicles. I'm surprised to find out that a lot of trailers get lost, and we have a startup that is helping, identify trailers on the highway and get them back for fleets. So that's connectivity. In autonomy, I think in automated solutions, I think there's efficiencies in manufacturing that can happen with automation. I feel like the new administration, you might see, at least in the United States, some softening around electrification, and funding maybe changing in that space. But automation, I think we'll see a bump. There was a little bit of a bubble there. We really like off-road geofenced areas for automated systems, and we still see that being something that'll be strong. And then, that shared mobility, we have a lot of investments in that space as well. And that is also an efficient movement of people. And there's one company that we have, VO, which is a micromobility company, and they have electric scooters, and they really work with a locale to find that solution. They just don't go dump their e-bikes in a rack and they sit there and nobody uses them, but they really think about who's moving where and what modality they need to move. And they're really getting some nice traction. So, we look at so many different things. I still, feel optimistic. Regardless of the climate, there are things that are the right things to do that make business sense. And those are the ones that are going to get the attention, right?
Yeah, interesting. Romy, same question for you. What are the trends? What are the opportunities that you think are peeking from behind the curtain?
Yes. Well, I can tell you we're working on something, and the timing's good because I'm allowed to talk about it. But we're working on first reveal right here. We're working on something called blended finance trust collectives. And this has been an idea emerging in the last 5 years. We had to test it out and see if there was some fruit there first. But if you think about the idea of collectives, this is just doing nothing more than grouping 10 or more companies together so that collectively they can do more together than they can in singularity. And then a trust collective would be a collective that's put together by a trusted agent, a trusted fund manager, a trusted foundation that's for bulk granting. So you're thinking about we're kind of grouping things together for efficiency. Then the blended finance part is part grant and part investment. And we really realized that, particularly in Southeast Michigan, we were part of helping to create some of that early deal flow for a lot of these enterprises that were not as sexy enough to get some of the traditional funding. There was definitely money for some tech funding, but if you were sort of anywhere else, you fell in the gap, particularly if you didn't fall in a normal investment type category. We had a lot of fun learning with that group and had about 10 or 15 that are sort of still going and working well today. We thought, gosh, how could we experiment with doing some grouped collectives and what do they need? So we took parts of this around the world, and it turns out as we were working on them, we worked across the United States with other groups who might be experimenting with blended finance, a little bit of grant, a little bit of loan, or a little bit of equity, pairing those together and doing a 2 to 4 year study on that. So we participated in that, and we participated in some other studies with these collectives. So now and we did a few small studies of putting a blended finance trust collective together, enough to get us so excited that we're going to start the first one in Detroit. And we're still vetting who we're going to put together. But essentially, we're going to put about 10 of these enterprises together that have a sustainable lens. They may or may not have an impact. And we're not going to group them by industry or thesis at this moment. We're just going to see if together, can we lift them to the next level faster as a collective, get them corporate contracts, get them bulk grants, get them bulk investing, get them some bulk development that in singularity, they'd be sort of fighting on their own. And can we kind of get them to the next lift and the next level of strengthening so that they can be some of the anchors of Southeast Michigan and some of those that we learn from. And then also extract a 3-year learning when we bring them together for 3 years. What can we do to inform the rest of Southeast Michigan in the group? So we've got some pilots going in Florida that we're about to launch. We're going to launch that one in Southeast Michigan. And then from there, we know that these can be themed up by an innovation challenge, or I love the mobility in automotive. I mean, Kelly, I want to talk to you afterwards because I've got so many questions and ideas of things that we're exploring, but we could even do something around a collective around mobility in automotive specific to adults with autism. You can get that customized and themed. We've got one starting in Florida around positive aging in the elderly community in the healthcare space, businesses that are focused on positive aging, like what can you learn together? So this notion of collectives, grouping businesses and basking them together, you're borrowing an investment strategy, unit investment trust, real estate investment trust from the public markets. It's just a known portfolio put together for a time period, 3, 5, 7 years. And then you're borrowing some blended finance techniques. So you're essentially marrying philanthropy with investment techniques to see if we can get a collective going and ring the bell on all the various flags to give sustainability a boost.
Fabulous. I can hardly wait
about this.
Yeah, and you should be. It seems that it seems to me that the timing for doing this couldn't be better.
If you yeah. Oops, sorry. Slight delay. I didn't mean to talk over.
No, in addition to it just being an all around great idea, I think the timing is also great. Yeah.
Well, just to add one more note on there, one of the things that we kept hearing, particularly for the Southeast Michigan businesses that were trying to focus on some level of sustainability, is that even though they had grown and somehow, in some cases, survived against all odds and sort of made it over the last 10 years, the foundation world their investment portfolio had done really well. So now they're massive, the gap between them. And now for some of the foundations where they were previously getting some grant funding for this work, now they're too small. We actually were part of a conversation. They're like, we're sorry, you're just way too tiny. Whereas before they were our candidates because they've gotten so big, or some of the requirements for the investment groups have gotten too big. So somehow we've got to take these that are focused on sustainability impact and give them a boost up. And maybe if we team them together, we can keep them growing as well.
Perfect. Great.
Super interesting. I just want to add one final thing because my comments weren't super focused on Southeast Michigan and Michigan in general, and it kind of goes back to Romy's comment at the beginning of, gosh, there's not a whole lot of deal flow here in Michigan. And we do have a global focus. But, as we think about the opportunity for startups in Michigan, and at least in the sphere that I'm looking at, right? There are a lot of companies in that automated robotics space that regardless of the garage of where they start their business, they're at a point where they need that manufacturing scale. And, Michigan has that. And as we talk about, deal flow and needing some marquees, if we can attract some of those companies that are, trying to manufacture and scale to grow to Michigan and have those big names on the buildings on our streets, I think that will help our deal flow as well.
Yes, it sure will. And as someone who's not born and raised in Michigan, but who came here to go to grad school and stayed, I agree that the marquee names help change everybody's thinking and I don't know, ideas of what's possible. It just, there's an invisible force behind that force for good behind that. So it's important. So this has been an incredible conversation, and I particularly love that the two of you are going to connect afterwards, outside. But I want to ask one last question is kind of just a little bit of a fun question. So for each of you, if you had a magic wand to solve one environmental problem, what would it be?
I'll go tech and nerdy on you with my
Good.
magic wand. Um, Based on a podcast I recently listened to, Lex Friedman talking to an MIT professor about fusion. If we could wave a magic wand and have fusion, it would change the game for everything related to sustainability. So if I had a magic wand, that's where I'd point it.
I love that. What first came to mind, and when I first thought about this, and then again just now, is clean air, clean water, clean food, clean nourishment and resources is always my first one. How could we get that clean so people feel healthier? They need energy to do this, to run these companies and stay at the helm of the companies. So many of the leaders in sustainability get worn out, and health is a big part of it. And then, if I could wave a magic wand on the part two of that, I would say, creating more financial resources to fund them and invest in them and create all this ecosystems and deal flow. It's still really limited in the space in the US. But I guess I would think clean up the air, the skies, the water, the food, give everybody some healthy ways to rest.
There you go. There you go. Well, Romy and Kellie, thank you, each of you, so much for joining us today. This has been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot from both of you and really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, this has been really fun.
Agree.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today and listening to the Green Stream, and stay tuned for the next one.
Thank you for tuning in to the Sustainable Business Network Detroit, the Green Stream podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on SBN-Detroit.org and stay tuned for more conversations on sustainability from inside and around the city.